guys. As we talked about in class today, I want to make sure that you have plenty of review time with me coming up on your first really big test on Wednesday. And since we're trying to focus on learning style this year, for those of you who are very visual or very auditory or very anything else, I want to make sure that we have some video available for you. So, starting with what we talked about today in class, I want to remind you of the big ideas that we discussed. Looking at, first of all, categories of early man, we want to be able to differentiate among those, and that's really what I want to start with today. Then we want to look at Neanderthals specifically. Tying that together, I'm going to go back to some of the pictures from that National Geographic article we looked at that was really cool. Then we want to look at changes with the Neolithic era, particularly with the onset of the agricultural revolution. Then life in Sumer and how civilizations develop, what the characteristics of civilizations are, and finally looking at art and some changes in interpretation on cave painting. So those are really the 5 big ideas that we want to focus on for this unit. So coming back to the beginning, categories of early man. We talked about several different early groups, and some of these are going to be more important than others. The biggest differences are going to happen between the prehistoric and Neolithic eras. So we want to be able to classify these in those big groups. The first group that we talked about, and we don't know too much about them, but we have some information, would be the Australopithecines. And I think I mostly spelled that right. The most famous Australopithecine that we know of is, of course, Lucy. Lucy being the name of the skeleton. And I'll have a picture up here for you in just a moment. Okay. So Australopithecines first. What do we know about Australopithecines? They walked upright, they had opposable thumbs, and that was about it. They were short. That's pretty much everything that we know. When we get into some of the later groups, this is when you have the very scientific names that all kind of become a blur after a while. We have groups like Homo habilis. Homo erectus. We talk a lot about Neanderthals. We talked about Cro-Magnon man. Cro-Magnons. Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens sapiens. Okay. It's nice in terms of scientific data to be able to delineate among all of these groups, but that is not going to be the most important thing here for our class. What I really want you to do is remember when the major transitions take place, or to know, for example, some of the specific details that we spent a lot of time on. We're not worried too much about groups like Homo habilis because we don't have a whole lot of information. Homo erectus, again, not a lot of information. But we do know a lot about Neanderthals, and we have information about Cro-Magnons, for example. So this is really what I want you to focus on. And again, we want to look at the transition between Paleolithic and Neolithic. And in terms of scientific data, Cro-Magnons are going to straddle that line. And remember that these groups don't necessarily move from one to the other historically. It's not like all the Australopithecines died and suddenly we had nothing but Homo habilis on the earth. There's a lot of overlap here with these groups. A question that someone asked today was, do all of these evolve from each other? Do we have these nice smooth transitions where one group becomes another? The answer is we don't know that for sure. We may have had, for example, multiple species of humans evolve from a common ancestor where they diverged and did not evolve from one another. So we don't necessarily know exactly where all of those linkages happen because we don't have all of the fossil records on that. But what we do know is that we see changes in the skeleton, and once we start really finding a lot of artifacts that people have left behind, we know that their behaviors changed as well. So that's really what we have in terms of evidence. The Australopithecine skeleton that we do have in Lucy, it is a partial skeleton. We don't have the whole thing. This is everything that we have of her. We do know that she was short in stature, and we can see from the bone structure evidence that she walked upright. Now, the scientist who named the skeleton Lucy is Donald Johanson. That's him with the skeleton right there. You may see his name on the end of course SOL test, and you may see references to Lucy. Right. We did spend a lot of time on Neanderthals, and if you go into external links on Blackboard, which is your last button here, you can pull up this copy of the article and look at some of the pictures. Now, this picture is a reconstruction using a Neanderthal skeleton of a Neanderthal woman. And there is the skeleton. As you can see from this picture, short, stocky, wide hips, very powerfully built. And when we analyze the skull, those pictures are actually not in here, but you can see from this picture that in this skeleton, you've got very large eye sockets. You have bones jutting over the eyes. The skull tends to be fairly flat. It's not as upright as in a modern person. The skull is lower. You have teeth that are pretty much destroyed. They're very worn down, and the idea is that they probably used that as a third hand, that they held a lot of things in their mouth, and that would explain why the teeth tend to be so damaged. But when we look at skull formation, those are the major differences, and it's really striking to do the side-by-side comparison, which we can add in later. Now, looking at the stature of a Neanderthal, oops, let's see if I can get this to come up. Come on, okay. This is the same skeleton, the reconstruction that they did, it's a whole body reconstruction, standing next to a modern woman. And in class, a lot of people said, wow, she's really hairy. No, that's animal fur, okay? Because they did have to wear clothes, it was very cold. But they were very simple garments, usually, just animal skins that maybe were laced together. But you can tell that she's very stocky, she's hunched, she's shorter compared to the very upright posture of the modern woman, so that's going to be very different. Some of the things that we found in this article were that in terms of the Neanderthal diet, based on the evidence that has been discovered in different cave locations, was that they ate a lot of different foods that maybe people did not really realize were part of their diet. They ate a lot of fish, a lot of things from the ocean for those Neanderthals who were living close to a coastline. They ate lots of different berries and roots and things, and all of that was part of their diet. Whatever was available, they would eat it. One theory is that they might have chased down vultures and other birds to steal the food from them. So yes, it might have been very difficult for a Neanderthal to go into the ocean and catch a dolphin, but to steal it from a bird of prey probably was a little bit different story.